Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about championship weekend, then let's talk about some initial comments on the Super Bowl. This weekend was terrible for me. Terrible. If this were a horror movie, I'd have blood all over my body. Let me say I expected New England to beat the Denver Broncos. I was at a casino. I was at Luxor in Las Vegas, sat down to watch the game. Saw a first quarter in which Peyton Manning passed for over 100 yards. Right, he hits Owen Daniels for a couple of touchdowns. But understand, after he jumped out to that fast start, Peyton Manning was almost completely shut down. Right, for the rest of the game, Manning totaled less than 100 passing yards. Right, understand Denver for the entire game only had 12 first downs. Now I know the story being bandied about, and it's accurate, is that Denver's defensive front was roughing up New England's offensive line. The offensive line coach has already been let go by the Patriots, right? But understand the Patriots had more structural problems. They did some things wrong. Brandon LaFell over 4 quarters was never targeted, right? Understand that even when your guy's not going to catch the ball, sometimes you need to throw in his direction just to keep the defense honest, just to stretch the field, just to stretch the defense. Right? The Patriots did nothing to get Brandon LaFell involved. Right? Just to remind the other team that LaFell's out there, why not throw a little short screen to him? Instead, it seemed to me that the New England Patriot offense was too built around the running back White, who was out running patterns, right? This guy was just involved in too many plays. It seemed to me that when Tom Brady wasn't throwing to Rob Gronkowski, he was throwing the ball to this White guy. Understand that the Patriots did a masterful job of limiting the Denver Broncos to 20 points. The surprise in this game, in my opinion, was the fact that the Patriot offense couldn't do more. Right? Brady passes for over 300 yards, folks. Right? They're gaining yards through the air. But Brady threw 2 picks, 2 back-breaking interceptions. The turnovers hurt, right? And the Patriot offense just couldn't click it in gear, right? Guys were missing in action. LaFell, Edelman, right? They were just missing in action in this game. Let's talk about the Carolina-Arizona game. Now, Carolina fascinates me. Let me be blunt here. I was expecting Arizona to win that game outright, certainly to cover. Right? Arizona was the underdog going into that game. Now, somehow Carolina has beaten 2 of, in my opinion, the top 3 teams in the league in their last 2 games. Right? I was one of those people who believed that the top of the NFC was either the Seattle Seahawks, right, the 2-time defending NFC champions, or the Arizona Cardinals, right? I didn't put Carolina in the same category as those teams. Now, what disturbs me with Carolina, and let's break with the media narrative here of Cam Newton as MVP and Carolina as the consensus public pick for the Super Bowl. What disturbs me is the way in which Carolina is winning the games. Right? This to me doesn't feel like the Chicago Bears when they were 15-1. Right? This just doesn't feel to me like a truly dominant team, because they seem to be winning these games on turnovers. Right? Luke Kuechly, back-to-back weeks, the linebacker scores touchdowns off picks. That Seattle Seahawks game, let's revisit it. Right? First half, the Seahawks still defrosting from the previous week in Minnesota, come out and look terrible. Turn over the ball multiple times. Right? Are down big. Then in the second half, they score 24 unanswered points. Russell Wilson ends the game with more than 300 passing yards. Right? You got the feeling that if you didn't have all these turnovers by the Seahawks early in that game, that the game might have been different. In other words, you don't see Carolina systematically taking apart teams who are playing efficient football. Rather, you see teams just come in and fall apart. Let's talk about Arizona. Let's face it, I don't care who you're playing in the National Football League. When you have as many turnovers as Arizona had, and it's turnovers not just by Carson Palmer, and I'll concede, that finger injury, much more severe than I thought. It certainly affected his accuracy. I'm not one of those who believes that Carson Palmer had a case of the nerves. I actually feel that part of it's physical, because he's missing wide open guys. But when you have more than a handful of turnovers, right? Patrick Peterson turns over the ball, and he's one of the very best in terms of kickoff returns, right? Certain things happened in that game where I thought Arizona beat themselves, right? It wasn't so much Carolina being dominant. It was really Arizona taking itself out of the game, right? Just look at the box score. You look at the number of turnovers and ask yourself, when's the last time you saw an NFL game where a team had that many turnovers and won the game, right? In fact, the turnover differential is so acute with the Carolina Panthers that, did you know, Carolina led the league in turnover differential? Right? You just get the feeling that they had one of the league's easier schedules. Look it up. Look at strength of schedule. Right? And the other team turned over the ball a lot. Now, I understand that a good defense contributes to the ball being turned over, right? Guys know how to strip the football. Guys know how to fall back into coverage and deceive a quarterback. That's true. But I do have to ask, which one impresses you more in terms of the level of dominance? A team that has a plus 20 turnover differential over the year. In other words, the teams they play are turning over the ball, right? So you know that the team that's winning the games is benefiting from turnovers. And let's face it, a lot of turnovers are random turnovers, right? You hit a running back, the ball pops out. I don't think that that's structural dominance. Right? Now, does that impress you more than the flip side argument? And it's jarring. I want people to look hard at the Denver Broncos here. I understand they're a big dog. As I make this video, in many casinos, they're 5-point dogs. Right? Understand that Denver had a -4 turnover ratio. In other words, they turned over the ball more than they got it. Right? Peyton Manning had a hell of a lot of interceptions in the time he played. He didn't even play the full season. But yet, Denver somehow wins 12 games. They're not relying on turnovers like Carolina is to win football games. If you're a savvy bettor, that should give you pause. Something's going on with the Denver Broncos that leads them to win games where they don't have to rely on turnovers. Now let me say, Carolina is the more statistically dominant team than the Denver Broncos. They have the better numbers, right? Look at the points scored. Carolina led the league in points scored, right? Look at just team efficiency in general. You're going to find that Carolina was really dominant. For example, Carolina led the league in first downs by rushing, right? Denver really can't run the football. Carolina can. Carolina is very effective. Jonathan Stewart over 900 rushing yards. Their real power runner, you saw it proven again this last weekend with his plunge into the end zone, is Cam Newton. Understand, too, that Carolina was second in the entire NFL in the percentage of their drives that ended in offensive scores. Right? Denver, by the way, was below average offensively. Denver ranked 24th in that category. Right? So, when you look at the teams, you understand that the numbers show that Carolina has the better offense. But shouldn't the following stat give you pause? The yards per offensive play, right? We're getting wonkish here because sometimes betting requires that you get wonkish. Carolina averaged 5.5 yards per offensive play. Denver averaged 5.4. Right? Let me repeat that. Carolina, 5.5 per offensive play. Denver, 5.4. Right? I believe the offenses in one game can be close. Right? Just keep in mind, New England, vastly superior offensive team to Denver statistically. Denver just beat them. Right? Peyton Manning, something was going on earlier in the year, right? We're hearing now Peyton Manning was banged up. He suffered injuries. He missed time, right? It took him a few weeks to come back, right? What if he's healthier now than he was then, right? So, let's look at the defenses. And I have to say, as good as Carolina's defense is, understand statistically the Denver Broncos are the better defense. It's a little bit different style-wise. Carolina's really more of a power defensive team, right? Denver is more of a speed rushing team. DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller. These guys come at you quick, right? Real quick. Well, the reason why right now, my feeling is that the value side of the line is actually against the public. It's actually with the Denver Broncos. Really comes down to the fact that, Cam Newton, as strong as his arm is, and it's very strong, make no mistake about it, he completed less than 60% of his passes, right? Understand that Carolina is really a rushing attack. And understand that rushing attack has a little bit of trickery in it. It's read option a lot of the times. Right? Cam faking to a running back. The defense doesn't know who's getting the football. Is it Cam? Is it the running back? And then, of course, by the time you figure it out, Carolina has gained a few yards on the play. Right? In the NFL these days, right, a few years after RG3's prime, right, you don't see the read option that often. Certainly not as often as Carolina runs it. Now, during a regular season, because Carolina's offense is so singular, right, very run-based, read option-based, right, if I'm catching Carolina after having played a conventional NFL team, and I only have a week to prepare, that read option might give me fits. I might not know how to deal with that read option. The novelty of it is going to lead to a lot of yards being gained. But there's a reason why the read option isn't as popular in the NFL these days as it used to be just a few years ago, right? When Colin Kaepernick ruled the roost, when RG3 ruled the roost, right? And that's because, just like in college ball with the read option, teams figure out that they can pick a side, right? I don't have to figure out who's going to get the ball when they, fake the handoff or make the handoff. I can just have designated guys hit the same player over and over. In other words, on every read option play, the defense can decide, we're just going to hit Cam Newton. Every time he fakes like he's going to hand off the ball, let's hit him. Right? If he hands off the ball, we'll have somebody else hitting the running back on every play. Right? We're going to set it up so we disrupt the read option. So we hit the quarterback so many times that the team feels that it's at risk. It's risking its quarterback by continuing to run this play. Understand, they've run the read option for years in college. Right? You don't do it in the pros because the QBs are too valuable. Now, Cam Newton is 6'6". He's built like a, Mack truck. Okay, fine. But Denver, with the league's best defense statistically, right? Best. Right? With a top 5 defense against the run, has 2 weeks to prepare for this novelty play that goes to the heart of the Carolina defense. Right? I don't expect Cam Newton against this level of secondary to throw the ball as much as he did against the Arizona Cardinals at home where he's comfortable. I know he had over 300 passing yards against the Arizona Cardinals. Right? If Denver can take away the read option, they'll be taking away a big part of Carolina's offense. Right? And my point to you, if you look at the numbers, is that Carolina's passing game isn't the kind of passing game that you can rely on. Right? If you take away the run. In other words, Carolina was much more of a run-centric team than they were a passing team. If you can take away Carolina's running game, right, you're taking away Carolina's competitive advantage, because as good as Carolina's defense is, it's not as good as Denver's defense. Right? So, the public has bid up this line. I don't think the line is going to get to key number 6 or 7. Right? I think what's going to happen is wise guys are going to let the public run with Carolina. Right? The line's going to jump all the way up to 5, maybe 5.5. Then I believe hardcore gamblers are going to jump in. Right? After the line gets bid up as high as possible, value bettors are going to hop in and they're going to take the Denver Broncos. Right? No one's kidding themselves in believing that Peyton Manning is still prime Peyton Manning. We understand that the last 3 quarters of the New England game, Manning didn't even pass for 100 yards. We understand he had a lot of 3 and outs in that game, certainly the second half of that game. Right? No question about it. I think we all know that if New England had converted that 2-point conversion and tied the game 20-20, it was debatable whether Denver would have been able to have mounted an offense in that overtime period. It seemed that Belichick, whose background was as a defensive coordinator before he became coach, had Denver's offense solved. Right? But there's a wild card in all this, isn't there? And that wild card is Denver's backup quarterback. Right? Understand the world changes when Brock Osweiler comes in the game, because Peyton Manning is in the pocket, reading the defense, then making moves. Osweiler's far more mobile. Peyton Manning's arm strength is limited. Osweiler, believe it or not, has one of the stronger arms in the National Football League. Demaryius Thomas, right, well north of 1,000 receiving yards this year, had over 100 catches. Emmanuel Sanders, Vernon Davis, who was missing in action this last game. Right? Understand there's a possibility that in the 2 weeks leading into the Super Bowl, that Denver comes up with a way to use both quarterbacks in the game to keep Carolina's team guessing. Right? Now, you don't have that same option with the Carolina Panthers. I believe we all know, and I understand the backups come in and look functional, but I think we all know Carolina is going to go with Cam for 4 quarters. Right? So, let's just say Denver has some cards to play. Even though the Carolina offense was far more successful than Denver's offense, right? It's not diversified. If you can take away, Carolina's rushing attack, Carolina's going to have some problems. And since Carolina has benefited the entire year from turnovers, the entire year, right? What happens if Denver doesn't self-emulate and have a lot of turnovers? Right? Understand, Denver doesn't rely on turnovers for their success. I know most Super Bowl champions have been in the top 10 in turnover differential. Right? Absolutely. I'll agree with that. But I also have to say that you need to fear a team, at least take a team seriously, that somehow has gotten to 12 wins with a negative turnover differential. Right? How is Denver doing it? I'm telling you, the defense is that good. Let's go one step further. There are injury concerns to both teams that you need to keep an eye on as a gambler. Right? Denver's secondary took a monumental hit when T.J. Ward, a 2-time Pro Bowler, right, injured his ankle. An ankle injury for a DB who is going to be running around trying to keep up with fast guys is a big problem. I'm not sure if you could just shoot the guy up, have the guy have the balance to still be effective and play on Super Bowl Sunday. Likewise, Thomas Davis, the linebacker, was a big force. He's one of the most key people on the Carolina Panthers, right? Understand, he's the sidekick of Luke Kuechly. Both of those guys are wrecking balls, right? The dominance of the other person allows, the sidekick to do their entire game. Thomas Davis broke his arm. Now, it's only in the NFL that people want you to believe that you're going to play in 2 weeks after a broken arm. Right? Be aware of that injury. Jared Allen, excellent sack guy, broke his foot. Again, they want you to believe that this guy can take a few shots and play on Super Bowl Sunday, right? Even if he's on the field, is he going to have the burst on a broken leg that he would have if he were healthy? Right? Also, Roman Harper, and this is significant. He's in the secondary, and understand who Peyton Manning is. Peyton Manning is a guy who sees a mismatch, immediately exploits it. Think about it. While the Owen Daniels mismatch existed, Peyton Manning milked that for 2 touchdowns, right, against the Patriots. Right? Roman Harper is injured. People are expecting him to be questionable for the Super Bowl. You need to look closely, because it's Peyton Manning, you need to look closely at starters in Carolina's secondary who are less than 100%. Right? So, my point to you is simply, Carolina is the superior statistical team. Right? Played a weaker schedule than Denver. Right? But Carolina is a statistically superior team, but they're not as diversified offensively as you would like. And it's on offense where they have their statistical advantage. Right? In my opinion, at a line of 4.5 or 4, right, which is where I think this game ultimately settles, right, on a neutral field. Carolina's just looked dominant in Carolina for 2 games. The value side of the play, absent some news of further injuries, right, lies with the Denver Broncos. Right? I believe Denver's defensive front is fast enough to deal with the read option. They know it's coming. Folks, Atlanta got blown out by Carolina the first time they played. Right? Blown out. Right? Turnover-filled game. What else is new? It's a Carolina game. The second time they played Carolina, in other words, the more they saw that read option, they beat Carolina. Right? Denver has 2 weeks to solve that puzzle. There's a reason why wise guys didn't expect Carolina to be all that this year, especially after the Kelvin Benjamin injury. Right? I believe it's because they looked at the offense and they thought this is a little bit gimmickry. Well, understand it's that offense and the turnover differential that has put Carolina where it is, right? That offense led the NFL in points scored, right? That offense led the league in first downs by rushing, right? This is the Super Bowl. Teams are going to take away your plan A. If you take away Carolina's rushing attack, in my opinion, they become vulnerable. Right? That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Let me just say, at 4 or 4.5, I'm leaning Denver. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Let's all try to beat the casino. Thanks for stopping by.